The grand ballroom was filled with a mix of opulence and unease. The luxurious chandeliers sparkled above an elite crowd of wealthy attendees, their conversations low and indifferent as they awaited the start of the auction. This was no ordinary auction. It was an event held in secrecy, where desperate individuals, many of them single mothers, sought financial security for their children by offering a lifetime of servitude to the highest bidder. It was a place where humanity's most vulnerable crossed paths with the richest, hoping to trade dignity for survival. Among the attendees was Sheikh Omar Al-Fahad, a reclusive billionaire from the Middle East. Known for his immense fortune in oil and technology, Omar was a man shrouded in mystery. He rarely attended public events, but tonight was different. Behind his stoic demeanor, he carried the weight of personal tragedy. His wife of 10 years had passed away in a car accident, leaving him childless and yearning for a family. Though he had access to every luxury the world could offer, his mansion felt hollow, and his heart even more so. Omar's advisors had convinced him to attend the auction, believing it could be a way for him to find a surrogate and fulfill his dream of fatherhood. Reluctantly, he had agreed, though the morality of the event left a bitter taste in his mouth. As he sat in the back row, his sharp eyes scanned the stage where women, one by one, stepped forward to be introduced. Each had a story of hardship, yet their dignity shone through despite their circumstances. When the auctioneer introduced a woman named Clara, the atmosphere shifted. She was a young single mother, likely in her early 30s, with a striking beauty that seemed unaffected by the hardships etched into her face. Her auburn hair framed her delicate features, but her most captivating trait was her eyes. Clear, determined, and unflinchingly defiant. Clara had lost her husband in an industrial accident 2 years prior and had been struggling to raise her 6-year-old son, Daniel, ever since. Mounting medical bills and an impending eviction had pushed her to this desperate decision. As Clara stepped forward, she clutched the microphone tightly and addressed the room. "I'm not here because I want to be. I'm here because I have no choice. My son is everything to me, and I will do whatever it takes to ensure his future. Whoever bids on me must understand that I'm not just a commodity. I'm a mother fighting for her child." Her words stirred an unusual ripple through the crowd. While many wealthy bidders were accustomed to treating such auctions as entertainment, Clara's raw honesty made some shift uncomfortably in their seats. But Omar's reaction was different. For the first time that evening, he leaned forward, his interest piqued. When the bidding began, the room was alive with fervor. The initial offers came quickly, each higher than the last, until the numbers reached sums that could erase Clara's debts and secure her son's future. Yet, Omar remained silent, observing the bidders with a calculated calm. It wasn't until the auctioneer announced a final call that Omar raised his paddle, his deep voice cutting through the noise. $5 million. The room fell silent, the sheer magnitude of the bid shocking everyone. The auctioneer's gavel came down moments later, declaring Omar the winner. Clara's expression was unreadable as she stepped off the stage, her fate now tied to a man she knew nothing about. Omar approached her with quiet resolve, extending his hand. "You're coming with me," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. Clara hesitated, looking into his eyes for the first time. There was no arrogance or cruelty, only a quiet sadness that mirrored her own. With a reluctant nod, she took his hand, unaware that this transaction was about to change both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The journey to Omar's estate was tense and silent. Clara sat in the back seat of the luxurious limousine, clutching her son Daniel close to her. The boy, wide-eyed and curious, peeked out of the window at the passing city lights, blissfully unaware of the gravity of the situation. Clara, on the other hand, was lost in thought, her mind racing with questions. Who was this man who had bid so extravagantly on her? What would he expect from her in return? She glanced at Omar, seated across from her, his expression unreadable as he stared out of the window. The car eventually pulled up to a sprawling estate surrounded by lush gardens and towering gates. The sheer grandeur of the property left Clara speechless. It was a world far removed from her own modest life, and its opulence only heightened her sense of unease. Omar's staff greeted them at the entrance, their movements efficient and respectful as they ushered Clara and Daniel inside. Omar turned to Clara, his tone calm but firm. "You'll have your own space here. My staff will assist you with anything you need. Take tonight to rest. We'll discuss the details of our arrangement in the morning." Clara nodded, unsure of what to say. She followed the housekeeper down a long corridor to a spacious suite that had been prepared for her and Daniel. The room was more luxurious than anything she had ever imagined, with plush furnishings, a king-sized bed, and even a small play area for Daniel. Despite the comfort, Clara felt like a stranger in someone else's world. That night, as Daniel slept soundly beside her, Clara lay awake, grappling with her decision. She had agreed to this arrangement for her son's sake, but the uncertainty of what lay ahead weighed heavily on her. She resolved to protect Daniel at all costs, no matter what was asked of her. The next morning, Omar invited Clara to breakfast in the estate's grand dining room. As she entered, she was struck by the contrast between the man she saw now and the enigmatic figure from the auction. Dressed casually in a white shirt and slacks, Omar seemed far more approachable. He gestured for Clara to sit across from him, and she obliged, her nerves evident in her posture. Omar wasted no time getting to the point. "I want to make one thing clear," he began, his voice steady. "I didn't bid on you because I see you as property. I don't agree with what that auction stands for. But when I heard your story, I saw someone who's willing to fight for their family, no matter the cost. That's a strength I respect." Clara was taken aback by his words. She had expected arrogance, entitlement, perhaps even cruelty. But Omar's sincerity caught her off guard. Still, she wasn't ready to let her guard down. "If you don't agree with the auction, then why were you there?" she asked, her tone cautious. Omar hesitated, his expression briefly clouded by something she couldn't quite read. "I lost my wife 2 years ago," he admitted. "We had been trying for a child for years. When she passed, I felt empty. I thought maybe, in some strange way, the auction could help me find what I was missing. But when I saw you, I realized how wrong I was. I don't want a transaction. I want to help." Clara's skepticism softened, but she remained wary. "Help how?" "I want to provide for you and your son," Omar said simply. "You'll have a home here, financial security, and access to resources that will ensure Daniel has a bright future. In return, I ask for honesty and trust. Nothing more." Clara studied him, searching for any hint of deceit. But Omar's eyes held nothing but sincerity. For the first time since the auction, she felt a glimmer of hope. Still, she knew that trust would take time, and she was determined to proceed cautiously. Over the following days, Clara began to settle into her new life at the estate. She remained vigilant, but Omar's actions consistently aligned with his words. He took a genuine interest in Daniel, often joining him in the garden to play soccer or teach him about the flowers. His kindness extended to Clara as well, though he never pushed her to open up before she was ready. As Clara observed Omar's interactions with her son, she started to see glimpses of the man behind the billionaire facade, a man who was grieving, yet hopeful, guarded, yet compassionate. It was a side of him that made her question her initial doubts. Slowly but surely, the walls between them began to crumble, setting the stage for an unforeseen connection that would change everything. As days turned into weeks, Clara found herself adjusting to life at Omar's estate. The initial tension between them began to dissipate, replaced by an unspoken understanding. Omar never demanded anything from her. Instead, he offered a sense of stability that Clara hadn't felt in years. Daniel flourished in the new environment, his laughter echoing through the halls as he explored the gardens, played with the staff, and grew increasingly attached to Omar. One afternoon, as Clara watched from a distance, she saw Daniel teaching Omar a game they used to play at the shelter. Omar, usually composed and reserved, was laughing freely as he struggled to keep up with Daniel's boundless energy. Clara couldn't help but smile. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. That evening, after Daniel had gone to bed, Omar invited Clara to join him for dinner on the terrace. The setting was serene, the table set with simple yet elegant dishes, and the warm glow of lanterns casting soft light around them. Clara hesitated, still uncertain of her place in this world, but eventually agreed. As they sat across from each other, Omar broke the silence. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he began, his tone gentle. "What was your life like before all of this?" Clara hesitated, unsure of how much to share. But there was something in Omar's eyes, a genuine curiosity, free of judgment, that made her feel safe. "It was hard," she admitted, her voice quiet. "After Daniel's father left, I struggled to make ends meet. We moved from shelter to shelter, and I took whatever work I could find. I never wanted Daniel to feel like he was missing out, but there were days when I wasn't sure if we'd make it." Omar listened intently, his expression somber. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for," he said after a moment. "Many people would have given up, but you kept fighting. For him." Clara's gaze dropped to her hands, a mix of gratitude and vulnerability washing over her. "I didn't have a choice," she said softly. "He's my everything." Omar nodded, his respect for her growing with every word. "That strength is why I wanted to help you," he said. "I've met so many people in my life, but few have the resilience you do. You deserve a chance to rebuild, and I want to give you that." The conversation shifted after that, flowing naturally as they spoke about their lives, their dreams, and the challenges they had faced. For the first time, Clara saw the man behind the wealth, the pain of his past losses, the weight of his responsibilities, and the kindness that had driven him to intervene at the auction. By the time the evening ended, Clara felt a newfound sense of trust toward Omar. She realized that, despite the circumstances that had brought them together, he was not the man she had feared. He was someone who understood hardship and wanted to make a difference. As Clara returned to her room that night, she couldn't help but reflect on how much her life had changed. While there were still uncertainties ahead, she felt a spark of hope, a belief that perhaps this was the fresh start she had been searching for. But just as she began to let her guard down, the first shadow of trouble appeared. One evening, as she walked past Omar's office, she overheard snippets of a heated phone conversation. Omar's voice, usually calm and measured, was tense and clipped. Words like investigation, past, and auction caught her attention, sending a shiver down her spine. Clara tried to dismiss her unease, convincing herself that it was none of her business. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. What had she gotten herself into? And how much did she really know about the man who had taken her and her son into his home? As the days went on, Clara's growing bond with Omar was overshadowed by her lingering doubts. She resolved to uncover the truth, even if it meant risking the fragile sense of security they had built. One late evening, Clara paced the hallway outside Omar's office, her heart racing. She had heard another heated conversation earlier, and couldn't shake the feeling that something was being kept from her. Torn between gratitude for Omar's kindness and the nagging suspicion that there was more to the story, she decided to confront him. Taking a deep breath, she knocked lightly on the door. Omar's voice called her in. When she entered, she found him seated at his desk, his face shadowed by the dim light of the room. He looked up, surprised to see her. "Clara," he said, his tone warm but cautious. "Is everything okay?" She hesitated, unsure of how to start. "I need to ask you something," she said finally. "I've overheard bits of your conversations, and I can't help but feel there's something you're not telling me. Why were you at that auction? Why did you really help me?" Omar sighed, leaning back in his chair. For a moment he seemed to wrestle with how much to share. Finally he gestured for her to sit. "You deserve to know the truth," he said, "but it's a long story." As Clara sat across from him, Omar began to explain. Years ago, he had been in a relationship with a woman named Layla. She was strong, independent, and unafraid to challenge him, a quality he deeply admired. But their relationship had ended abruptly when Layla left without explanation. It wasn't until much later that Omar discovered she had been forced into a desperate situation, much like Clara's. I couldn't save her, Omar admitted, his voice heavy with regret. When I learned about the auction, it brought back all those memories. I thought if I could help someone else, maybe it would ease some of that guilt. Clara listened intently, her initial suspicion replaced by a deep sense of empathy. She saw the pain in Omar's eyes, the burden of his past, and the sincerity behind his actions. I didn't expect to meet you, he continued. But when I saw you and Daniel, I knew I couldn't walk away. You reminded me of Layla's strength, and I saw the same resilience in you. I wanted to give you a chance, the chance I couldn't give her. Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she absorbed his words. I had no idea, she said softly. Omar leaned forward, his gaze earnest. Clara, I didn't bring you here out of pity or guilt. I did it because I saw someone who deserved better, someone who just needed a little help to rebuild. And I hope in time you'll see that too. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling over them. Clara felt a mix of emotions, gratitude, compassion, and a newfound understanding of the man who had changed her life. As the days turned into weeks, Clara and Omar's bond grew stronger. Clara began to let go of her fears, opening herself to the possibility of a future she had never dared to imagine. With Omar's support, she started taking steps toward independence, enrolling in classes and exploring job opportunities. Meanwhile, Daniel thrived, his laughter and energy bringing joy to everyone around him. He became a bridge between Clara and Omar, helping to solidify the unconventional family they had become. In time, Clara realized that Omar wasn't just her benefactor, he was her partner in rebuilding a life filled with hope, love, and promise. Together, they transformed what had once been an act of desperation into a journey of healing and redemption, proving that even in the darkest moments, kindness and compassion could light the way forward.